Hey friends, I'm Michelle Markey and I want to ask you a question. Do you believe that money can buy happiness? Let me know in the comments what you think, because the answer is debatable and will vary from person to person, because happiness is highly subjective, and also it depends on how you were raised, with which money stories in your family and neighborhood, and what your conceptions about money are, because we all have different lifestyles. Some like to live lavishly while others embrace financial minimalism. So your cost of living definitely affects your happiness. And there are some studies that have found minimum levels that you need in order to have emotional well-being and also, dare they say, happiness. And I'll talk about some of the findings from these studies. And also I'll adjust for inflation how much of a minimum salary you really need in every state of the union, because some of the findings that have come out are not yet adjusted for the crazy amount of inflation we've been seeing. So I'm going to use a figure of inflation of about 9% to really illustrate how much more money we all need to make in order just to survive in all the states in America. And also it's important for us to know this information so that we can better advocate for ourselves when we're going for a new job or career, and that we demand the pay that we're worth, because we all contribute a lot of value, and America has seen productivity gains that have outpaced wage increases since the 1970s. So in order for all of us to recognize what we're worth, it's important to have knowledge and then take action with this information. So if you're also on the pursuit of financial happiness and also you want to have a better future for your families, please be sure to like and subscribe to my video and YouTube channel, because it not only makes the YouTube algorithm happy, but I'm super grateful to all of you for watching. So thanks. And one popular study that's frequently cited by articles came out in 2010 by Princeton psychology professor Daniel Kahneman, that found that, yes, money does buy happiness, but to an extent, where they found that the minimum amount of money that a person needs to make every year in order to be happy is $75,000 in 2010 dollars. So if we use an inflation calculator in 2022 dollars, that's actually equal to $100,500. So you actually need to make $25K more than back then, about a decade ago, in order to have the same level of happiness. And as many of us know, a lot of Americans are not earning nearly enough to make that much amount of money, where the median US income was only $67,500 in 2020, which was actually down from 2019 when the median income was $69,500. So considering that, people are making at least $30,000 below what they need in order to be happy. And that's on an individual basis. That's not even reflecting household income, which is also pretty low. And the figures online are pretty varied. So definitely check your sources. But the source that I'm referencing comes from the US Census Bureau. And if we also think about how much inflation is taking away our purchasing power, CPI inflation was about 8.5% from March 2021 through March 2022, and incomes during that same time have only risen by 4.5%. So we're definitely not catching up with our wages yet. So it kind of goes with some popular advice that if you're still in the same job for 2 years, you're not earning enough of an income if you stay in a job for more than 2 years. So it gives a lot of people reason, like we've been seeing with the Great Resignation, to want to jump to hopefully greener pastures where maybe other jobs and careers offer us better pay. So definitely check what's available to you in terms of what your job is currently offering you, and if there's comparable ones that can give you better pay. And in this updated study that came out in 2018, measured happiness and income satiation or satisfaction around the world. And it was by Purdue University professors that used 2016 Gallup World Poll data that had a sample size of over 1.7 million individuals. So keep this in mind when we need to adjust their thresholds for inflation. And so they measured two main categories of happiness at how much minimum amounts of money you need to make per person in order to to be happy. And the two categories were first, emotional well-being, which is your ability to produce positive emotions, thoughts, and feelings, and your ability to adapt when confronted with adverse and stressful situations. And then the second category was life evaluation, or also known as life satisfaction, which is an overall measure of how you are doing and also the higher level goals you have for yourself and also how you compare to others. So using these two main categories, they found that for emotional well-being in 2016 dollars, you needed to make at least $60,000 to $75,000, which in 2022 dollars is actually equal to $73,000 to $91,000. So keep that in mind in order to have minimum emotional well-being. And then for life evaluation or satisfaction, you needed to make at least $95,000 to $105,000 in 2016 dollars, which in today's terms is actually $116,000 to $128,000 that you need in order to be happy in most places in the US. And actually, the more that you live in wealthier regions of the world, the higher levels of income you're going to need in order to be satisfied. So keep all this in mind when you're trying to get your next job, and also maybe mention to your employer that the average person to be happy in the US probably needs to make at least $115,000 to $128,000 to be happy. And I liked how the Purdue study included this simple tool for assessing life satisfaction. So I'd like to encourage all of us to take a moment and identify where we think we stand on this control ladder, where 1 represents your worst possible life and 10 represents your best possible life. And so if you did that and imagine where you are on this ladder, and if you ranked yourself at 7 and above, then you're considered to be thriving. And if you gave yourself a 5 to 6, then you might be struggling. And if you ranked yourself 4 and below, then you're suffering. So it's important for all of us to identify where we think we are on this ladder, because being aware of where we are can help to ignite change and motivation to want to do something about our state, and then also hopefully strive for something better in our lives that we can be more content about. Because for millennials in particular, according to a Wells Fargo study, we find that happiness and satisfaction are directly linked with financial responsibility and stability. So if we identify that our financial lives are not going so great and we're either suffering or struggling throughout some of our financial handling, then maybe we can know that this is not a state we want to stay in, and then seek help from people that we respect and admire, so that hopefully we can be on a better track of how we're not only managing our money, but then we can eventually be thriving when it comes to how we're using our money to reach happiness in our lives and for making a difference in the people that we care about too. And what I also found to be neat is how the Purdue study included income satisfaction levels for different regions, genders, and education levels, where it's interesting how women need to have more money in order to be satisfied in life, where in 2016 dollars for all of the following, women needed to make at least $100,000 to be happy, compared to men only needing $90,000 to be happy. And then if you had less education, you only needed to make $70,000 to be happy, compared to if you had higher levels of education, then you needed to make at least $115,000 to be happy. And then if we also take a small sampling of countries throughout the world and how happy they are, in the US, in order for us to be happy, we need to make at least $105,000 in 2016 money in order to be happy, in that sort of middle of the pack. And we are, as of 2021, the 19th out of 146 countries happiest in the world. And that compares to where maybe if you lived in Germany, you only need to make $90,000 and you're the 13th happiest country. So you're 6 spots above the US. And then if you're in Australia, you're even happier at 11th happiest in the world. But you have to have a higher amount of income to be happy, where they need to make a whopping $135,000 just to be happy. So the interesting thing is the US falls in the middle of this range between 90 and $135,000, and yet we're less happy than the Germans on Australians. So go figure that the US would be less happy compared to countries that make more and less than we do. And yet we seem to be a little bit lower on this happiness scale compared to other developed countries. But maybe we have some ways to go before we can achieve some happiness, because as many people around the world know, a lot of Americans are constantly working and our work-life balance isn't the best. So I'm sure compared to how they enjoy much longer leave times in Europe, that we still have some ways to go in order to have people enjoy their time off more and not work so much in the US. And the minimum amount of salary that you need in order to be happy is definitely affected by your cost of living. And that's going to vary, and it tends to be cheaper in southern and Midwestern states like in Tennessee and Nebraska, where you have a lower cost of living. So you don't need as much money in order to be happy in some of these states compared to if you live on the West Coast or East Coast, where if you live in states like California or New York, you're going to need way more money just to have a decent life, because your cost of living is so much higher in the coastal states. And so considering that, if we take Go Banking Rates update on that Purdue study in salary amounts that they suggested in every state that you need to be happy as of 2021, some of these figures show that states like Mississippi and Kansas and Oklahoma have some of the lowest minimum salary that you need in order to be happy, where for Mississippi you needed only $87,000 and Kansas and Oklahoma around $91,000 to $93,000 in 2021 dollars, which if we adjust that for inflation, I estimate for 2022 that we tacked on another 9% for inflation. So really by 2022, you're going to need to make $95,000 in Mississippi to be happy. And then that gets into the low 100K range, starting in Oklahoma, Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, and so on. And then if we scroll down, I'm not going to read across all of these states, but looking at some of the middle states where you can expect some decent levels of income to have a good life is where in 2021 dollars in North Carolina, you needed to make at least $101,000 in 2021. And now in 2022, you're going to need to have at least $110,000 to be happy. And this is pretty similar with states like Wisconsin and North Dakota and Utah. And then if we scroll all the way down in the most expensive states to live, this includes the likes of Oregon, which in 2021, you needed $138,000 to be happy. And now you're going to need at least $151,000 to be happy, which is kind of shocking to me because I didn't realize Oregon was so expensive to live in. And then also Massachusetts, you're going to need a minimum salary of $139,000 in 2021 to be happy. And that's equal to about $151,500 now in 2022. And then California came in at almost $146K in 2021 and is now in 2022 $159,000. New York is $153K in 2021 and now in 2022 is $167K. And Hawaii, you needed at least $203,000 in 2021. And then in 2022, you're going to need at least $221,000. So across all of these states, they gave you a flavor of what you can expect if you want to live in these states and expect to be happy depending on what salary you want to try to achieve. And this will definitely affect how happy you'll be living in some of these states. And so if all of that was TMI with the data that I sourced from Go Banking Rates on their take of how much salary you need in order to be happy in every state, the gist of it is if you average these out, in 2021, you needed to make on average $110,000 per individual per year to be happy. And if we adjust that for inflation, where I think it's raging a lot, so basically, I think you need to make at least $120,000 in 2022 dollars in order to be happy these days, no matter what state you live in the union. And so if you enjoyed this video or learned something, please like and subscribe, and also go out there and make some money and be happy. Till next time.